First, Jake, it's first time that you're on the show. We like to have our listeners kind of aware of who they're talking to. So, first, what do you folks do at American Legislative Exchange Council?
Sure. So I'm Senior Director of Policy on the ALEC team, and we are a membership organization of state legislators from across the country, all 50 states, that are committed to the basic principles of limited government, free markets, and federalism. So we cover most issues, but what I spend most of my day working on is emerging technology issues, as well as energy policy. But what I've especially been looking at is this issue of children's safety online and cell phone policies in schools, which I think is what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, Michigan's House Bill 4141, it bans the use of smartphones during instructional time. It's been in the works for a while, but it only recently got signed into law by Governor Whitmer. How well does this line up with your policy limiting student use of cell phones in K-12 classrooms?
It's actually a great example that other states should be looking at. So this has been a trend in recent years where you have actually state laws or even executive orders from governors dictating to schools kind of what the device policy should be at schools. And what Michigan's done is they essentially set a floor that personal cell phones, I should clarify, and electronic devices for students, they should not be used during instructional time in the classrooms. They either need to be stowed away and turned off in their bags, or if the school wants to institute some sort of a locker or pouch system where the student will store their device, that is okay too, but no personal device use during the school day. But it does give districts and communities some flexibility if they want to institute a policy where they can still use the device to contact their parents over lunch or in between classes. That's okay. Or they could have an even stricter policy and completely ban it throughout the entire day.
Yeah, that's going to be my follow-up. Did you think the states needed to step in instead of allowing school districts to have more, full control over cell phone use in classrooms?
It's an interesting question. A rebuttal I often hear is, do we even need this to be a law necessarily? And, maybe not, but this has been an increasing issue where schools, for better or worse, there are a lot of smart devices or smart watches that children have now, and they're bringing them to the classroom, and maybe it's causing distractions, and teachers are frustrated. They're trying to use what little instruction time they have to teach the students, and they're being distracted. On top of the fact that a lot of schools have what they call a one-to-one device policy, where they're already issued a school-issued computer or a tablet, so there really is no reason for a student to be on their personal cell phone during class time. So this essentially just, again, provides some uniformity across the state of Michigan, that this expectation that students won't be using their personal devices during class. And then it's not shutting out all technology, because there is some beneficial uses of it, but it should be the school-issued device that's occurring on, not their personal phone.
I do want to actually get to that about shutting out all technology. We'll get to that in a second. And there's an interesting case study here in northern Michigan going on, but that news just came out. But we kind of talked about the rebuttal that maybe a school district would provide. Hey, we want more local control. But let's talk about from the parental side. Parents might say, hey, I gave them this cell phone. I want them to have this on their person, or I want them to have access to it. Or the next step being, would this hinder, my child's ability to contact me in case of emergency? What's usually the response to that concern or concerns?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. And there is one part of the Michigan law that's helpful, is that it does direct that the schools do need to come up with a protocol for how the school is going to handle wireless devices during an emergency situation, because that is, it's something I hear a lot is, oftentimes the students aren't even that much. They're kind of okay with this policy. I mean, they might be not on board at first. In time, they're
Sure.
kind of okay with it. If the parents do want to have that access to their child, and to be honest, there have been some instances with some of the emergencies or school shootings in the past where the schools haven't always handled the response well. So to your point, the parents want that. So I think the schools really need to focus now on building that trust. If they're really going to shut out personal devices, they need to have that infrastructure in place, that if the parent needs to relay a message, in an emergency or even not an emergency situation, that they can confidently feel like that is going to get to their child in a timely fashion. Schools haven't done the best of that in recent years. And back in the day, pre-smartphones, there used to be that infrastructure in place where you could take a note to the office or call the office. and that information would get through, but that's kind of atrophied now that a lot of that was taking place through personal smartphones.
Sure. I want to kind of look at technology in schools just a little bit broader. Where do you think that tipping point is, or maybe even has been, where, technology's problems in the classroom kind of outweigh the benefits in the classroom?
So it's a very fair point. So, there was, at least from my vantage point, there was kind of this rush to get technology in the classroom. And I'll even admit, I'm kind of an optimist as far as technology, and I 100% think that our next generation needs to have the digital skills and expertise using things like computers and artificial intelligence to be successful in their jobs. But it hasn't always been deliberative. It's a lot more than just giving each student a tablet and then just hoping that by osmosis they're going to become technologically literate or responsible. So that's actually ALEC. Part of what we do at the American Legislative Exchange Council is we develop model public policies like this limiting cell phones bill to help legislators solve some of these problems. And one of the model policies we have actually is making digital literacy and technology education a part of the school curriculum. So some states like Florida and Tennessee have signed this into law, where it would be part of the health curriculum. Especially when you're talking about some issues as far as overusing technology or even bordering on addictive use of some of these tools, but also cyberbullying risks or not oversharing information online so someone could cyberstalk you. Some of this basic information needs to be treated with the seriousness that it deserves, and the classroom setting is a good place. Along with the home setting, parents need to set the example at home and teach them that this is serious.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting because I hear my parents are older and their generation, we didn't grow up with technology, so we really don't know what we're doing. But then there's on the flip side of that, as you mentioned, there's this kind of assumption that the people growing up with technology, my generation, younger, just kind of knows what to do and implies that they know what to avoid. And it's really not often the case. I mean, we see plenty of stories in the news all the time, as you pointed out, cyberbullying and sexual exploitation and things like that. So that is actually really interesting about having some sort of curriculum tied in with that. And kind of going a little bit further and localizing this for our listeners up here in Northern Michigan, we've been talking specifically about smartphones. There was a story coming out. MESA Consolidated Schools, they're doing away with the Chromebooks and moving back to real books. It's called a No Screens Literacy Initiative, going back to handwriting instead of typing because they claim that they're finding, they can't read, they can't write very well. Everything's being done on a computer. Do you think something like that could be beneficial, or is that kind of swinging the pendulum too far?
Yeah, I like to hear that. And, I mentioned I'm in favor of technology. I have a 3-year-old at home myself, and I'm kind of starting to think ahead about what is the balance of technology? Should we be giving a 6 or 7-year-old, assignments on a tablet? So I think a great thing that ALEC is working on is really empowering parents with school choice. Just as some states, like I live in Virginia, which doesn't have a ton of school choice opportunities. But if Michigan or other states want to allow a school like you're describing to offer that alternative approach and make it more accessible for Michigan families, and if that's successful, then that essentially will be a competitive advantage for your region, and then hopefully that competition will benefit the rest of the state as everyone maybe if there's a good approach they can emulate that and not feel like they're stuck to the let's be real, like test scores have not exactly been doing great in the United States compared to some of our peers around the world. So we really need some jolt of innovation, and maybe the Chromebooks maybe aren't the best example for all use cases. Pen and paper might help. I know it helps with some knowledge retention and some of the gross motor skills. So we shouldn't discount that, and it's great to see schools are experimenting with that.
Yeah, not only is the United States suffering, but Michigan has ranked pretty much near the bottom for the past several years in almost every metric. But how does this law, House Bill 4141, how does that fit within the broader national movement? Is it pretty, comparable to other states? Is it stricter? Is it more lax? Where does it fit in?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned this before, but there are about 38 states across the country that have policies like this within the past 3 years. And there's pretty much 2 different kinds of policies. You have the type that Michigan is going after, where it's really laser focused on instructional time, but also allowing a reasonable choice for communities, because it's ultimately communities and parents that know what's going to be best. And what works for Northern Michigan may not work for Detroit, for instance. But you do have some states like Virginia, where I live, where they do set a top-down strict, they call it a bell-to-bell ban policy, where the first bell of the day to the last bell of the day, zero device usage, zero tolerance for that. So essentially directing the schools, but it still it's already prescribing the policy. So Alex believes that Michigan's approach is better because, again, it sets that baseline for uniformity, but still allows communities to craft a policy that actually fits the needs on the ground. And they're the ones best equipped to do that, not lawmakers in Lansing or Sacramento or Richmond.
Jake, how can our listeners reach out to you or follow the work of Alec if they have more questions?
Sure. So we have our policy research and our model policies available on our website, alec.org, ALEC.org. Hope you can check it out.
We're speaking with Jake Morabito, Senior Director of Policy for the American Legislative Exchange Council. Jake, thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.